Next up, we have another panel, this time made up of our employers sponsoring and supporting today's event. So each of the employers in the panel are actively championing the skills and experiences that people of the armed forces community have, and they each wholly recognise the value that service leavers and spouses bring to business. So this panel gives you the chance to hear firsthand what employers are looking for in today's job market, and will help you to find out which opportunities they currently have and expect to have in the next 3, 6, 12 months. As with the panel earlier, I'll ask each panellist to introduce themselves and their current position, and then we'll go to questions. So I've got some that have been pre-submitted by you before the event, and then we'll go back live to the audience again. So if I could just have the slides down and the panelists on screen, that'd be fantastic. Brilliant. I think that's everybody here. So I guess we will go straight into it. Michelle, would you be happy to kick off introductions?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Esme, and good afternoon, everyone. Absolute pleasure to be able to come along this afternoon. My name's Michelle Osborne. I'm the head of Military Veteran Affairs and Emerging Talent for JP Morgan in the EMEA region. I joined JP Morgan almost 3 years ago today, direct from a 23-year career in the Royal Air Force, the last 5 years of which was spent in the Ministry of Defence, doing various roles in international policy and defence strategy. So very much looking forward to speaking to you and taking your questions and seeing whatever we can do to help you navigate your resettlement.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. Hannah, can I hand over to you?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hannah Yates. I left the Royal Engineers just over 5.5 years ago, and I'm now a senior manager at KPMG, working in our operations department. Alongside that, I also lead our military leavers program that we have at KPMG, and also I'm vice chair to our military network. So still trying to give back as much as I can, and really pleased to be here today. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Tony, we'll come to you.
Hi, Esme. Nice to see everybody. My name's Tony Ellender. I'm the Emerging Talent Manager for Balfour Beatty, the construction company. I look after our graduate and apprentice programmes, and I'm part of our military steering group. And prior to Balfour Beatty, I was in the Royal Navy.
Thank you. Georgia.
Yeah, hi everyone. So happy to be here. I'm Georgia, Senior Director of Customer Success at Braze, which is a customer engagement platform used by some of the best brands in the world like Deliveroo, Klarna, Bloom and Wild. I had a bit of a wiggly route into technology myself, and I'm really excited to talk today a bit around the kind of opportunities that exist in the world of SaaS. I've had the absolute pleasure of working at Braze with a number of military leavers, as well as having hired some, and I think we kind of had this moment of thinking we have a lot to offer each other. I think I've been particularly aware of the contribution that those people have had on the business, because I'm also a partner of a Gurkha officer. So I'm really happy to be here today and share kind of any details around what we think we have to offer you guys and answer any questions that you have. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Georgia. And Gemma. Oh, Gemma, you're just on mute.
I knew I'd do that. Gemma Parrott, I'm a managing director at Goldman Sachs. I've been with the firm 24 years next week, actually. I am the wife of a Royal Artillery officer. I'm also co-head the Veterans Network for the firm in EMEA, and have been involved in kind of recruiting veteran talent for, you know, the past kind of 8 or 9 years. So more than happy to share our experience and thoughts on the subject.
Brilliant, thank you. So as I say, we've got some pre-submitted questions here, but please do keep putting them into the Q&A or the chat function, and I'll make sure I ask them to our panelists. So firstly, which types of roles do you see ex-military people best suited to? Are there any particular disciplines or skill sets that you see veterans excelling in? Tony, can we start with you maybe? You're on mute now.
Oh dear, pathetic. You'd think after a year of this rubbish we'd get over that. So I'm going to give a really bad answer actually, Esme, because my answer is all and any of them. The reality is across Balfour Beatty, and we're a construction and infrastructure company whose annual results are out today, so take a look at our website. We have veterans and reservists and spouses in all areas of the business in all types of roles. And I guess what I would say is they're all open to anybody. That the military themselves have got all sorts of different roles, and so have most major companies. So the assumption would be we're a construction company, we'll be looking for Royal Engineers or people from mechanical electrical engineering backgrounds. That's true, but we've also got ex-forces people in HR, in IT, in general admin roles, and at all sorts of levels. So any of them, I think the key thing is for people, whatever service they're in, whatever rank they are, whatever their specialisation is, to do their research and see where they'll fit in civilian life.
Thanks, Tony. So, George, are you happy if we come to you next? I know Braze are heavily recruiting at the moment and sharing a lot of their roles on the OA website. Are there any skills or roles or functions that you see veterans best suited to?
Yeah, definitely. I think SaaS more broadly, so software as a service, because I know my partner uses a million sort of military acronyms, so useful just to spell what that kind of means for us, is a really good place more broadly, right? Because what it is fast paced, people are wearing lots and lots of hats, hyper growth, you need to be adaptable. Those are all environments which I guess tend to resonate with military leaders. I think we've seen particular success kind of within that in sales as a natural area. There's a lot there around how you work with people, drive, motivation, that kind of thing. But I think, what's not in debate is this is a hugely skilled group of people. I think what really we can help paint a picture on is what motivates you, because specifically within SaaS, there's lots of roles that people have never heard of. I head up our customer success department, which is one of the most ridiculously titled departments that I think I've kind of come across. But if you're interested in problem solving and strategy, that's a really exciting place. We have a number of people who work there who have army experience, and sales is the other area. But I think SaaS in general, and just being curious around the different weird named departments is a good place to start.
Thank you. I'm conscious we have quite a few questions to get through, so we'll go on to the next one unless there's anything that the panelists wanted to add at this point. No, fantastic. Okay, so we had a lot of questions around COVID and its impact before this event. So how has COVID impacted the way you recruit? Michelle, I know that JP Morgan, they're still running military insight weeks and lots of support programs. How have things changed for you over the last year?
Okay, so if I think back to this time last year when we all got sent home, my team and we looked at each other and we sort of couldn't quite believe the position that we were in, because everything that we did was in person. So all our military transition and pathways programs, and I can talk more about that later, it's all run in person, it's all run on site. And we very quickly pivoted to ensure that everything could be done virtually. So that was for the current cohorts. I think there have been challenges with that, but there's also been great benefits for us. So last year, we went through the recruiting process for the 2021 Military Transition and Pathways Programme, which is a 6-month programme that we run every year from February, offering service leaders the opportunity to come in and place across all our lines of business, to go back to the first question, and have a really enriched experience about finding out what financial services is like. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that it's your unknown unknowns when you're resettling. In terms of the way it's affected us in recruiting, COVID didn't affect our thinking about scale and scope. If anything, our programme has grown by 40% over the past year, because we've got such a big commitment to this talent acquisition pipeline. But what we did do is think really carefully about how we engage with our candidates, because it is difficult in a virtual environment. So we ran a series of events, online, smaller events, really interactive. And we had to also think about how we replicated the natural networking that would happen around our events. So a lot more support went in around the candidates, a lot more direct engagement, and a lot of sort of sub-events to actually support. So we're really, really pleased that we've been able to maintain the scope and scale of what we've been doing, but just thinking intelligently about how we really reach in and connect with our population.
Thank you. Gemma, how about you at Goldman Sachs? Have things been massively affected in terms of recruitment?
Yes, well, our military internship programme last year, I think the cohort had been with us for about a week when we went into lockdown. So they went from initially in person to all being virtual, but it didn't really affect our outcomes. Similar to Michelle, this year with our programme, we had to pivot to doing like an all virtual recruiting process, which obviously has its pluses and minuses. That cohort started last month. I know that we've done, similar to Michelle, a lot of events trying to help those people integrate into the firm, and it's something, I don't think that's particular to the kind of people coming in from the military. A lot of lateral hires we're doing, is very challenging, bringing people into an organisation when they're only joining virtually, and I think we're all looking forward to the day when we can get back in the office and see people face to face.
Definitely. So our next question is around career flexibility and work-life balance, part-time work. These were all mentioned a lot in the lead up to the event as areas of concerns for people in the audience. So how are you as employers dealing with part-time and flexible working requests? And what does home working look like for you in a post-COVID world? Hannah, are you happy if we start with you?
Absolutely. I think I probably speak for everyone here that the pandemic has actually shown that we can be much more flexible in where we're working, and that affords so many more opportunities to people who aren't necessarily based in London or wherever that office is, for example. We haven't finalised what KPMG's sort of post-COVID world looks like, but from my personal experience, I can absolutely see that there will be much more home working, part-time working. Many people have had to juggle childcare, other caring responsibilities in a way that they've never had to do before. And particularly for us, and again, I can only speak for KPMG, but the firm has been so flexible and so supportive in that. And I think that it's definitely put kind of mental health and the well-being of employees at a different position on that sort of pecking order than where it's been before. So absolutely, I see there being many more opportunities for home working, therefore more flexible with location, and much more part-time opportunities, which is offered by us as standard at the moment anyway.
Oh, fantastic. Georgia, I can see you nodding your head in agreement. Is that the same with Braze and flexible opportunities? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I think echo what Hannah said there. I think that luckily we were always set up infrastructurally and culturally for flexibility kind of before COVID. So we all work from laptops. For some of us, we travel a lot. We have unlimited holiday policies and wellness days and stuff set up there to support our employees. I think I just kind of on Hannah's theme there, I think what it helped us do was also be sensitive to how, the softer stuff that we were doing, like cultural get-togethers and meet and greets, like, down the pub on a Friday kind of stuff, actually doing that on Zoom had a big inclusivity uplift because suddenly people could do that from different locations and stuff. So I think we actually saw that as being beneficial. And then I think in addition, just the one thing I'd add is we have a transfer policy internally, which can be really helpful for changing circumstances. So some roles can be more flexible than others. And I think having an employer who can help you navigate different roles internally to help you accommodate that can be really beneficial as well.
Definitely, thank you. So we've had a question from the audience. Tony, I'm going to ask you firstly for this one, please. So would you look at a CV of a military spouse negatively for showing a change in role and employer approximately every 2 to 3 years, or would you look past it so long as the skills for the role are being met?
The second, I would say, and it's an interesting point because constantly changing roles is actually not that unusual with lots of people. Service personnel for a start, they're moving every year or 2 years or whatever. I guess it's useful to know that somebody has moved a lot because they're a military spouse. So, get that reason out of the way up front, and approach those companies that are already armed forces friendly. They've signed the covenant. They're actively looking for any of the armed forces community to move. And it'll depend on the industry. In construction, the industry I'm in, actually it's fairly normal for people to have moved roles, jobs, locations, even employers quite regularly, because that's the nature of our industry. We're not office based, we are project based, and so movement is normal. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. It's fantastic.
And thank you for saying you're going to ask me the question, because it meant I could come off mute this time before.
Got to make sure the panelists are listening in as well. So Michelle, I'll do that again. I'll make sure I let you know who I'm going to be asking. So Michelle, this question is for you if you're happy to take it. Are there any opportunities for veterans who left the service over 5 years ago with JP Morgan, or are the Insight Days and the events, are they only for those currently going through resettlement and transition?
So we run a number of things. So our military transition and pathways programs are there to aid with transition. So we ask that people who apply to that have been out of the military no longer by 2 years at the date of joining. And that's because the very constitution of those programs is to aid with transition. But we also have an active vets group within the firm. So if there are veterans, and we've helped many who have been out of the forces for a number of years and are looking for maybe a career change or a sector change, and they apply to direct hire opportunities. And so my Office of Military Veteran Affairs, we will support those individuals with their direct hire, because if they haven't got necessary industry experience, sometimes they can sort of fall at the first hurdle because the CV doesn't quite match up. So we support that individual, we signpost their application to the recruiter and the hiring manager. And then we also reach, and this is the beauty of having nearly 1,000 people in the region in the Vets Network, we have vets everywhere, every line of business. So we can make a connection in to a vet who can talk about the day-to-day, the lived experience, explain the role. So there is great support there. I hope that answers the question.
Definitely, thank you. So we have another question, I think, from a military spouse. So Emma's asking, curious on your thoughts on how a military spouse would get a foot in the door if they've not had the opportunity to gain qualifications or relevant experience, for example, if they've been out of employment due to family or service commitments. Does anyone have any maybe more general advice on how to overcome this challenge?
I could jump in just quickly there, and I think all the big firms do run these sorts of programs. In JP Morgan, we have something called the re-entry program that is specifically designed for people who might have had a career break and assisting them back into the workplace. And I advertise that program through yourselves, through all the different sort of defence conduits. So I would look for these targeted programs because they are specifically designed for that, and you'll get a great wraparound learning and development opportunities, support, mentoring, and that will really assist, because I know it can be daunting, if you haven't worked in an industry before. So that would be my word of advice.
Thank you. Gemma, you're nodding your head. Is there anything else to add for that one?
No, it's challenging. I think, I feel like I'm just repeating what Michelle's saying.
Sorry.
I think it is about finding, those programs. Lots of organisations have programs targeted specifically at people who've taken a career break, for children, for example. So I'd focus attention there. And think about the soft skills that you have, and focus on those. Organising a household, particularly with small children, brings its own level of soft skills, as I know. So, I wouldn't, just because you don't have technical experience, don't underestimate the kind of transferable skills that you have.
Thank you.
Add also, just from my side, I think probably in companies like Braze, where there's kind of less than 1,000 employees, those opportunities may be less well signposted. But most departments have a role, like we have an associate role, that is there to support career transfer or career changes. And I think what you get in exchange is then, because we're growing really fast, leadership opportunities come up really, really quickly. So looking for those initial individual contributor roles, knowing that you're in a growth company, and so things like leadership skills can come into play quite quickly, is maybe an interesting approach as well.
Thank you. Tony.
Can I just add as well, I know I shouldn't say this in our virtual world now, but certainly it's important in our world, the importance of geography. So I completely agree on the returners program. Lots of companies have returners programs, so look at that as a returners program, not a military spouse program, I guess. Take that other identity. But geography is also really important. So work out where these companies are actually based, where their offices are, where they have projects, factories, locations, whatever it is. Because one of the other things about, you know, the military life is you don't just move jobs, you move geographies quite significantly. So do your research about what companies, you know. I'll give you a simple example. We've got a contract with Lincolnshire County Council for the next 8 to 10 years for all their highways. Lots of RAF bases in Lincolnshire, so it really makes sense to actively engage with the RAF community in Lincolnshire. So, and for people in that community to think about which companies are operating in that area. So geography does matter as well, even with teams.
Thanks, Tony. Hannah, did you just have something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, networking takes on a very different approach in the world we're currently in, but definitely don't underestimate the value of your network, particularly if you're really keen to work at a specific company. Look on LinkedIn, speak to your contacts, see if they have anyone that they could introduce you to. It's not necessarily that first level of network, it's that secondary level, and use that. You know, I get a lot of messages from people I've never met, but we have mutual connections, and you know that there will be many of us in that similar situation. And just ask the question, ask if there's someone that they could be signposted towards. You know, be bold and brave, I suppose. Put yourself out there and see what happens. It's not always going to be easy, but you know, it may yield some results.
Thank you. One of our speakers earlier today, you know, talked about the importance of LinkedIn and the fact that so many employers are using it as a recruitment tool. As employers and working within recruitment HR teams and looking for talent, is it a platform that you individually use to look for people yourselves? And if so, what are the kind of the key words that you're looking for, or is there anything that people should be avoiding in order to be noticed?
I can give my view on that. LinkedIn is absolutely essential. It is, you know, a key platform for us. We advertise a lot through it. All our events are advertised on there. It's just a key communication platform. I think in words of advice, just be really careful about content. So sometimes you see that, you know, military folks tend to post, you know, bantery type content, and that could be misconstrued. So keep it super professional, work on your profile, look on the LinkedIn tip sheets, and because all employers will go to your LinkedIn profile to look at you, and to you know, it provides more flavour to what can be quite a bland CV. Or you know, CVs are just one-dimensional, aren't they? So LinkedIn does give a much deeper impression of that person. And I always say, never write anything that you wouldn't say to your first RO. It's always a very good tip.
It's a brilliant tip, thank you. And just thinking about LinkedIn again, before we move on, we have quite a few people come to the OA, you know, they're looking for career advice, and they still have their LinkedIn pictures, a picture of them in military uniform. As employers, what does that say to you? Do you see it as a positive, or should people be in a civilian uniform instead, or does it not make a difference at all?
I think that's fine. As long as your shoes are polished and you're looking smart, ready for parade. I guess it probably depends on how long ago you left. You know, if you're in your resettlement phase or a recent leaver, uniform is fine. If you want to go to a company that's actively looking for service leavers, if you left 3, 4, 5 more years ago, don't, I guess, because you no longer wear it that often. Probably don't fit it either, I expect. So yeah, it depends on what phase you're in, I think, Esme.
Brilliant. So we have had a question from Sarah in the audience. So my concern for myself is that due to the limited time in service, I will have not developed the skills and the management experience as those who have served for 10 plus years. What would the panel's opinion be and advice be to service leavers who've only served 5 or 6 years? Will companies or organisations still look favourably on our limited experience? Everyone seems to be nodding their head. Hannah, can we come to you first?
Yeah, I think any experience in the military is going to be seen as valuable. We're definitely you know, the military cohort at KPMG are absolutely regarded as the people who get things done, as one of the threads. It doesn't matter, you know, we've got people who have maybe been in for a year and unfortunately they were medically discharged, right up to people who have been in for, you know, right up until their 20-year point. So, you know, we have different levels of roles in the firm, which again align to people's experience. It doesn't, I don't think that should be something that would put you off. It absolutely will be valuable. It just may be that it would align to a different level of role within the firm to a different level, again based on your experience and how you're able to demonstrate that. But I served for 7.5, 8 years, and you know, I don't feel that has personally, I don't feel that impacted me negatively versus someone who may have been going for a role who had served for more than 10 years. Again, my personal opinion, but you know, have confidence and be proud of what you've done. It's seen as hugely valuable.
Thank you, Michelle. Georgia, you're both nodding your heads as well. Are you in agreement?
Yeah, I'd actually go to one stage further and say I'm actively looking for a really broad range of service leavers. I don't want a box full of people with all the same levels of experience and background, because I've got roles across the organisation at all different levels. And, you know, our programmes are deliberately designed to be accessible to everybody, regardless of their rank and relative seniority. So, for example, this year I had a post-command lieutenant colonel join the programme, and I had, a soldier join the programme, and we have found them rewarding placements which are going to match their skill set, provide just the right amount of stretch. I think the main thing is just to think about the experience that you have and how that can apply and how that's relevant. So for me, it's actually attractive to find a full range of applicants in the candidate pool.
Yeah, and I think I would just add from my perspective, I mean, my role in my office didn't exist 5 years ago. So the kind of this concept of time might mean one thing in your perspective and can mean very different things depending on the industry that you're looking to get into. So yeah, I think being able to tell your story authentically and explain why you're interested in a role is probably more important than the time that you're able to put against what you've done.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember being told a short while ago, and it might have been the OA that said it, or it might have been the CTP, that actually the average length of service in the forces is around 9 years. So actually your 23-year, 30-year, full career is the unusual one. So I found that really interesting, because it put a lot of things into perspective. As the panel said, the time doesn't matter if you're pitching yourself at the right level. And if, we have people joining us on our sort of graduate apprenticeship schemes that maybe, got medically discharged during their training. So, if you just remember that actually the full career is unusual, I find that quite reassuring.
I'd also, I was going to say, I'd pick up on something that Johnny Mercer mentioned at the end. I think often people who've been in the military for a very long time find the transition into civilian life more challenging, because they have certain expectations of what it's going to be like. And I think you have to come in to, and I would say the people who've been most successful of Goldman are those who've come in who are very flexible in how they think about things and don't expect to have a certain status or a certain, rank or type of role once they come out, because whilst you have 30 years service in the military and you've got lots of soft skills, you don't always have the technical experience that you need to go in at a very senior level. So sometimes having between 5 and 9 years or 10 years is kind of a sweet spot, I would think.
Thanks, Gemma. So there's been a question from Hayley in the audience. So there's been a lot of talk of regular serving personnel. The reservists often have a portfolio of full-time and part-time roles, but don't necessarily benefit from all of the transition packages. What help and advice could you give to reservists who don't necessarily have civilian jobs, but are looking to dial down their commitments in green? Who would like to start? Who's happy to? Tony?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. So I guess I was just reflecting when somebody's just put in the chat about there's people who attend military selection events to be able to put them on their CV. I think that's a good call. And I think any service connected with the military is something you should be proud of and should reflect on your CV and let people know. So I see a lot of graduate CVs, and if they mention that they've been in the ERNU or the OTC, I will pick up on that. If you've got reserve service either alongside a civilian career or mixture of full and part-time, have it there front and centre. Be proud of it, and use it to demonstrate the skills you think you've got for that job in the same way that you would with any other job. And if you are a reservist alongside a civilian job, give both of them centre stage on your CV, because there might be a tendency to concentrate on your civilian job and just sort of put your reserves bit at the bottom, ignoring the fact you've maybe done 10 years and been promoted and done lots of really good courses and developed lots of good skills. So be as proud of it as you would be of regular service, I would say.
Yeah, I'd really echo that, and I think it's actually a differentiator. So when you're looking at CVs and talent, hiring managers are always looking for something that's a bit different and interesting, and so it really marks out. But also think about that you might not have to dial down your reserve commitment. So we have a very active reserve force within our firm. We had a number of them mobilised for the COVID task force response. So I don't think it's an either or. I think you can do both. And I think it's great advice to be proud of it and represent actually all of the anchor skills that you've developed in reserve service, and even better if you can demonstrate how you've used your reserve service experience to actually amplify your sort of commercial role as well.
And I think one thing that we've done is we've worked really closely with our recruitment team so that they understand what type of things they might see from someone who's been in the military, whether that's regular or reserve service, on CVs. They know who within the recruitment team they can speak to. They know who within our network and our military leavers program kind of leadership structure that they can speak to if they have any questions. So that's something that a lot of firms will also have done in the background from a recruitment team and kind of an upskilling perspective to help kind of close that gap between, someone sending in a CV that has a lot of maybe military jargon on it. Actually, there are people in the firm that can help break through that. So really just considering your kind of audience, I suppose, and the firms that you're applying to, and consider what structure setup they may have.
Thanks, Hannah. That's really good advice, and actually links in to a question we've had from Sophie in the audience. So for LinkedIn and appearing in searches, would the panel recommend we have our job title as, for example, Army Officer, or should we use a civilian translated job title? And I think this probably links back to what do you think about military jargon and acronyms and titles within CVs more generally. So Georgia, could we start with you?
Yeah, I would always say, and again, there's a lot of similarities in the tech world. We have quite a lot of jargon going on. I think I would never underestimate a compelling cover letter and how much of an opportunity that is for you to translate what it is that you want your CV to say into the language of the employee that you're wanting to resonate with. In terms of the practicalities of LinkedIn title, I actually don't think we necessarily have a preference, but I guess my one piece of advice would be really, really using that cover letter as an opportunity to unpick anything that you think you might want to stand out on your CV.
And I think not necessarily translating anything you've done into the military into civilian speak, but it needs to be, the reader needs to be able to understand and put into context what it is you've done. So we sometimes see CVs that come through that have been so civilianized that we can't really work out what service they've been in, what rank they've been in, what they've really done. Like they've almost gone too far. So again, consider where you're the roles you're applying for. Are you applying for specifically a military program? In that case, there may be a bit more flexibility on what you'll include in there, maybe a little bit more wording related to the military. But then if you're applying for a role maybe directly, consider how you could translate into less military speak what it is you've done. The reader needs to understand it. And I know when I was going through resettlement, someone said, give your CV to someone who doesn't really know anything about the military and ask them to read it and for them to tell you anything that they don't understand. Because by having the lay person look at it and say, I don't really understand what you've done or what this is trying to say, you can then kind of go back to that and reword it so that that person can understand.
Thank you.
I would say on LinkedIn, Esme, use both. Why can't you say team leader brackets corporal or manager brackets sergeant? Use them both, then they'll both get picked up. And just to follow up on Hannah's point about the civilianization of CVs that people are encouraged to do, don't do it too much. All of the companies here and others are actively looking for people with military connections, so don't take away anything that's about the military. And I guess one of the bits that can help the reader that maybe doesn't know anything about it, that might be still interested in you, is numbers. So don't just put team leader or platoon sergeant or whatever. Write down the number of people that you were leading or managing, supervising, responsible for. Don't just say convert your role into operations manager or project manager, that universal thing ever since The Apprentice came on. Actually say about the length of projects that you were doing. So if you quantify things, I find that really helps with translation. That makes sense.
Definitely. I can see a lot of our panelists nodding their head in agreement. So I think we'll take that as correct. Thanks, Tony. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. So firstly, one from Ellie. And Gemma, if you're happy, we'll start with you. So now COVID has proven remote working. Are any of your roles going to change to 100% home working or being home-based? This would be of massive benefit to military spouses, especially in building their careers.
I know my HCM colleagues are spending vast amounts of time looking at, the future state of work. I mean, I think we can say there will be more flexible working. And I think some of that will be a choice. I know, for example, within our engineering division, there are a lot of people who will continue to work 100% of their time from home. For other roles, and I will count mine in that, I wouldn't want to work 100% from home because I would want to spend some time in the office to see my team and kind of, interact with them on a face-to-face basis. So I suspect, although I don't think the firm has reached a firm conclusion, that there will be a lot more flexibility around how people work, and a lot of that will come down to personal choice.
Thank you. Georgia, is there anything to add from Braze's perspective? I know you have roles all over the place at the moment. Will any of these be home-based?
Yeah, I think we've been very lucky that a lot of our very, very senior leaders don't live anywhere near our major offices and do spend a lot of their time working from home. And we have conversations all the time and increasingly with our teams around who wants to work 100% from home. And that's a conversation that we have and happens, luckily, again, because of tech, all the time. I think the also thing is we spin up offices all the time. And so every time we establish a new office, for me as a spouse anyway, it's useful because it means that when my partner looks at what job opportunities he wants to continue with, I think about, where's my nearest home base when I think about staying at Braze. So I think, yes, both in terms of working from home, but also being able to change where home is for you are concepts that Braze both supports.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, so if you're happy, I would like to go to each panelist for just a closing top tip or recommended reading material before we close this panel. Tony, can we start with you?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of today. My piece of advice would be do your research. There isn't one answer. You've got, very different companies here in size, scale, and industry. There isn't one answer. So do your research before you dive in, and certainly before your first interview.
Thank you. Hannah.
Just don't underestimate the value of your experience. I'll leave it there, short and sweet.
Brilliant, short and sweet, but perfect, thank you. Gemma.
I'd kind of echo some of what Tony said. I think particularly if you're going into an industry like financial services, do your research, have a good understanding of where you think you might fit in the organisation, or what interests you, and be prepared. I know, for example, we have a lot of people who think, oh, they want to go into investment banking, but don't really understand the realities of that. It can be like being on our permanent operations, because it's very hard work and they work extremely long hours. So that's not necessarily a good fit for someone who has a young family, for example. So I think do your research would be my top tip.
Thanks, Gemma. Michelle.
My tip, based on my own experience, is make resettlement a job. Okay, so when you're thinking about your transition from service, think about it in the same way that you would if you were doing a job at work. So get professional about it, plan it, be deliberate, record who you've spoken to, and always think about what's next. So never leave a meeting with someone without a referral onwards. So yeah, really attack it. And then, underlining what everyone else has said, research is super important. We're not looking for technical experts. You won't be a technical expert. You won't have sector experience. So really understand what it is and what sort of areas you think you'd like to go into. And what we're really looking for is just evidence of motivation. And the way that you can really demonstrate that is showing that you've learned a bit about the firm, you've maybe networked with some people, and you back yourselves, because you can do it, and everybody wants to help. And don't be frightened or hesitant or sort of maybe a bit humble about reaching into networks and asking for those introductions, because people want to help, because we've all been where you are.
Fabulous, thank you. And Georgia, over to you.
I would say I found, women in profession X groups incredibly helpful around my career, and similarly to kind of to what we're doing here today. There's also women in technology, there's women in customer success in technology, there's all those groups that exist as well. So it kind of, if you find that element of community useful for networking, I would lead into that as well as you're doing your research.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you to all for the great intelligence there. I mentioned before that the employers here today are actively hiring and supporting the ex-military talent pool. And after this event, there's a document going out with the best kind of call to action for each panelist afterwards. So which website to visit or who to email with your questions. So make sure you look out for that. And just a final thank you again to all of our panelists for your insight today, but also for sponsoring this event. It wouldn't go ahead without all your support, so it's much appreciated, and we hope to hear from you again soon.